Good morning, Florida Club Managers Association. This is Tommy Spalding in Denver, Colorado. Happy August 10th. And we are on our fifth of our six-part series of the Heart-Led Leader webinar series that the Florida Club Managers Association has been sponsoring in the last couple of years. We've been blessed to have incredible speakers and leaders and CEOs over the last couple of years. And today we're in for a real treat. Tim Sanders and I have been friends for years. He's been on the speaking circuit and met him a long time ago. And he's incredibly bright and just got a great message. There's thousands of, 20, 30,000 leadership books out there. And there's a list out there called the top 100 best leadership books of all time. And his book, Love is a Killer App, is on that list. And I actually think if I had to name 5 of the greatest leadership books, Good to Great, 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, Love is a Killer App would be on that top 5 list of a leadership book that everyone should read. Tim is a former chief solution officer, is an executive at Yahoo, and now runs a new startup company, Upwork. He's written 4 or 5 different New York Times bestselling books. Incredibly bright guy. So I've asked him to talk to us about Love is a Killer App this morning. He's going to talk for 45 minutes. And then we're going to do Q&A. So if you have any Q&A, just type them in the chat and I'll collect all the questions and we'll do the Q&A. And the last is the password for credit is, of course, love, because that's what Tim's going to be talking about. Tim, thank you so much for joining us this morning and blessing the Florida Club managers.
Well, Tommy, what a generous introduction. I greatly appreciate it. And it's just great to be with all of you this morning. And by way of context, I really feel like I understand a lot of the issues, challenges, and opportunities in front of you as club managers, leaders, because I live in Talking Rock Ranch outside of Prescott, Arizona. We're a golf community of around 300 or so families. I've gotten to know our general manager as well as a variety of different staff managers from recreation to the coffee shop to food service. And I really have a lot of empathy for the challenges they go through, especially around staffing and talent and the crazy concept of members versus customers. But we could talk about that later. What I want to talk to you about today is the idea of leading, managing, and living your business life with love. Napoleon Bonaparte very famously said often that the leader's role is to define reality and then give hope. Now stop and think about that for a second. It's a fine balancing act for you as a leader to be frank and candid and a realist to those that you lead. But at the same time, find ways authentically with an endearing sense of credibility to give them hope. Hope that they'll get better. Hope that things will get better. Hope that workload will get better. So this idea of reality hope as a continuum, I think about a lot when I look at the challenges of being a leader or a manager. Now, for the rest of this presentation, I'm going to say leader, but I don't want you to, in your head, think about leader as something at the top of an organization. I think about a leader as someone who has any type of followers or team members who look to you for direction. So this also subsumes the idea of being a manager. Back in the late 1990s, or as I like to say to the younger folk, the turn of the century, I discovered the meaning of business life. Fortunately, I stopped and I wrote it down. The meaning of business life, I believe, is to love and to care and to grow everyone that you come in contact with and to build your legacy every single day of your business life until the end of your business life. So, as to quote the Dalai Lama in The Art of Happiness, at the end, you'll be able to look back on your life and enjoy it a second time. Now, when I came to this discovery, I mentioned before, it's back in the late 1990s. I'm in my late 30s. I'm just entering into my career of being a leader. But one of the things I learned right away is that I had to define what I meant when I said love. So Love is the Killer App, the book, was really a blueprint on what's the breakthrough strategy for you as a professional, as a manager, as a leader, to find a type of success that gives you a sense of meaning and a sense of happiness and satisfaction. When I was talking a lot about the internet in the 90s, people were always asking me, what's the next big thing? What's the breakthrough? What's the next killer app, which was a techie term? And I begin to say, the next big thing will always be people. The next big thing for you as a leader, as a manager, as an innovator will be to learn how to love. Now, I went off and did a lot of definitional work, meaning I went out and researched this concept of love. I read all kinds of books. I read Leo Biscalius. He's a great writer in the 70s. He wrote the book. He literally wrote Love. He wrote another book called Living and Learning. Then there's books like Meyerhoff's book on Caring, which was really about the concept of compassion. So here's what I landed on. Love in general, like when you think of love for someone in your family, like maybe like one of your kids. In that case, love is the selfless attachment to the other's happiness and health and well-being, right? Selfless. There's an almost sacrificial level of generosity when we think about love in a very personal context. But what I realized that love at work is different. And let me tell you what I mean by that. I'll talk about this mentor here in a minute, Stanley Marcus Jr. He was one of the most important mentors in my life. I met him in Dallas around the time I was working for Mark Cuban. And he, in one of our mentorship lunches, shared this concept with me. He said, the way I think about Neiman Marcus, his dad had founded it, by the way. He says, the way I think about Neiman Marcus is that Neiman Marcus, or the company, is a baby. And it's a baby that can't take care of itself, can't even walk itself across the street. My job as a leader is stewardship, right? I look after the baby. I teach everyone around me to look after the baby. The baby is the center of the conversation. You know the old saying, no one puts baby in the corner. That's an important viewpoint because that allows us to be protective of the institution we work for. Because, in fact, he's right. These organizations are dependent on leaders. You see organizations go down all the time because of bad leadership. We have, if you will, a social contract to our employer to keep the lights on, to add value, to maintain the stability of the culture. So when I think about love in the business context, and this is the important part, here's the definition I wrote about in my book. Business love is your intelligent promotion of the growth of the other by sharing your intangibles. So I'm going to stop and break that down because I think it will help you really understand what I mean by love is the killer app. So when you as a leader are demonstrating love in your business life, what that means is that everyone you work with, they could be reporting to you, they could be a peer, they may even be your boss. You are intelligently promoting their growth, their ability to improve their performance, their ability to find work-life balance, in some cases, their mental health. You are intelligently promoting that by sharing intangibles. These are attributes, if you will, that actually grow as you give them away. And I say intelligently, meaning you understand that you can't always scale to opportunities to help, meaning time is finite and you have to be intelligent about where you put your time. Now, in practice, what does this mean? Well, it really comes down to this idea of sharing intangibles. And that was the aha moment for me that led to my initial lectures on the subject and then eventually writing the book. Every person has three intangibles. And as we share these three intangibles through the feedback loop, if we make ourselves available, they actually grow in supply. So unlike time and money and political resources like favors that don't scale infinitely, these three I'm about to introduce do scale to any type of situation you could possibly imagine. And they are your knowledge, what you know, concepts that you understand that you're able to explain, your knowledge. Give knowledge away, as I'm about to explain, you get it back infinitely. Second, your network of personal relationships. Your network is your ultimate net worth. And as you intelligently share your network with others through feedback and goodwill, your network will grow exponentially. And then finally, compassion. That's your third intangible that you can share to the moon and back. When you possess this compassion for others, your desire that they do not suffer unnecessarily, your hope that they find the success they look for intrinsically. When you share compassion, you become a more compassionate person, as long as you follow a very, very important mantra, and it's this: pay it forward. I'm about to talk a little bit about the concept of sharing, this active generosity gene that I want you to manifest, because we all have it. But I want to really talk about the model, if you will, that belies really getting this right. In the book, I wrote about this concept, NSPS, nice, smart people succeed. Notice I didn't say nice people succeed. Because if there is no intelligence, meaning if there is no technique, if there is no real model for doing this over the course of the long haul, either A, you will become cynical because you will start to believe that people don't give back and they don't keep their promises and they don't say thank you, or B, you will be seen as a doormat and people will run over you because you are generous to a fault, if you've heard that phrase. So I want to unpack this idea. When I say pay it forward, here's what I mean. When I mentor someone, like this afternoon, I'm going to mentor a young man who's in a career transition. We're going to talk for an hour about adjacent career opportunities, experiments he needs to conduct, and then I'm going to make some introductions for him if he shows me progress, okay? And I guarantee you, every time I enter into these mentorship or network connection conversations, people always ask, Tim, what can I do for you? That's the reciprocity rule. And a lot of us, we live on reciprocity. We think if I help someone, they should reciprocate at the very least. They should say thank you. They should give me credit, but ultimately they should repay me. You've got to let that go. Relationships are not built by give and take. Relationships are built and sustained over time by give without expectations, or as I like to call it, give and give. Now, I'm going to stop there because this is important. When I have this conversation and someone says to me, how can I ever repay you? This is my teachable moment for them, right? I say, I don't want you to repay me. I enjoy this far too much. Here's what I do want you to do. I want you to become aware and in search of opportunities to help other people like I'm doing with you now. In other words, I want you to pay it forward in the future by finding your mentorship opportunity, your opportunity to network others. And I don't need you to report back to me. I need you to find a way to make this part of who you are. It will make you happier, but more important, it will make you significant. And at that point in the conversation, I release them from any expectations of reciprocity. Now, let me tell you why that's really critical to your leadership style. Leadership is not only about, finding this balancing act between reality and hope. It's about modeling a certain type of behavior that can create the next generation of managers and leaders or power contributors in your organization. And when you talk about pay it forward, you actually create scale to giving. I had a recent conversation with Professor Adam Grant. He's the author of a fantastic book you all should read called Give and Take. It's really about this myth of reciprocity that we're talking about right now. And one of the things Adam said to me that really resonated is he said, like, the problem with tit for tat or give and take and this whole reciprocity model is that eventually someone under reciprocates and the whole thing kind of goes away. He says paying it forward makes the world go around. And if you adopt a pay it forward mentality, you will never know if they don't. It's very different than reciprocity. You can then trust the process and you can be a giver for years. I've lived under this love is the killer app process since the 90s, and I'm still doing it to this day because I haven't built up that cynicism. People haven't disappointed me because I am trusting the system. And let me tell you why this is important. I believe people are fundamentally good. And people have a desire to make a difference in the world, and people fundamentally model the finest behaviors they observe. In other words, I truly believe that pay it forward as an express way of sharing works. Before I get into how you share these three intangibles as a leader, I want to talk about a problem, and it's a problem we all face. It's a problem you probably faced during the COVID lockdown. I can only imagine what you went through. I did see here in our club environment what our staff and management and leadership went through in trying to keep members optimistic, but at the same time deal with a variety of different pandemic restrictions, supply chain service issues, and almost 100% of frontline staff turnover. It's the scarcity mentality. You have to solve for it. And if the tea leaves are right, and we are heading into an economic headwind, which will dramatically reduce everyone's spending and budgets and things available for you to offer members, the scarcity mindset is something you have to solve for, because if you don't solve for the scarcity mindset, you will stop giving. I'm going to stop and talk about that for just a second. Around the time I discovered this idea of love as being a breakthrough strategy, I was also benefiting from reading a book my wife recommended to me. I think it was a book that really kind of kickstarted, a lot of my thinking strategically around giving. And it's the book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey Sr. Dr. Covey ended up becoming a friend of mine. We shared the same literary agent. I got a lot of insights from him, even beyond the pages of that book. But let me just summarize this idea to you, and I'll just kind of be quoting intermittently Dr. Covey along the way. People are scripted, deeply scripted sometimes, to possess the scarcity mindset. The scarcity mindset is a view of the world that there's not enough to go around. So because we believe there is not enough to go around, it fundamentally changes our outward conversations, the kinds that influence other people. We often define ourselves based on what we lack and not what we have. If you've ever heard the phrase lackey, this actually goes back to Great Depression times. A lackey is a person that leads with I need, I lack, I don't have. This is the negative-minded person people like Dr. Norman Vincent Peale were trying to rehabilitate in the 40s and 50s and 60s with the power of positive thinking. But the worst issue here, and this is something that we all struggle with, is that when we have that scarcity mentality, we start to enter this world of conflict and fear and selfishness, and it feeds on on itself. So the more we believe there's not enough to go around, the more we hoard. The more we hoard creates more resentment, which creates more negative feedback, maybe even more staff turnover, which reinforces the concept of scarcity. The mentality we need to strive for, the exact opposite, is the abundance mentality. Dr. Covey wrote that the abundance mentality comes from a deep sense of self-worth and confidence, which forms the belief that there is enough to go around. With our innovation and our resilience and our patience, we will realize there is enough to share. And this abundance mentality, which I believe is a function of design, how we design our life, it changes everything in not only how we talk, So we lead with first what we have as opposed to what we lack. The most important thing it does is it changes our behavior. It causes us to have true feelings of love and attachment for other people. It causes us to share. It causes us to cooperate during the most important moments. And it creates a virtuous cycle of giving because, again, I believe, and I think the research confirms, people, despite what you might read on social media, people are fundamentally good and they want to make a difference and they want to model the behavior of those they follow and respect and admire. So let me quickly give you just a few pieces of advice on how to protect your abundance mentality, how to avoid the scarcity mindset, because the scarcity mindset is an airborne disease you catch from fools at work that say there's not enough to go around, okay? It gets induced during a crisis or during a recession or during a time of belt tightenings and cutbacks, and you have to be on guard. So here's the idea. Number one, Chicken Little must fry. As the leader, you have to be aware that there are people in your organization that work at your club that can spread the concept that there's not enough to go around. You've seen them before. They might be what you call a fire starter. I call them Chicken Littles. They say the sky is falling, and they are incredibly contagious throughout an organization. They create a funk, if you will, and you got to challenge them. I didn't say fire them. I say you got to challenge them as a leader. You got to ask them, where are you coming from? Where is your evidence? You've got to show them the hope and continue to challenge this Chicken Little behavior as not being part of the culture of success that you are cultivating, because culture is a conversation that you lead. And the more often you talk about what we value and the way things are done around here successfully, the more you create that behavior. The other thing I want you to do is to encourage giving and gratitude. G&G, those two things cultivate the abundance mentality more than anything. I mentioned before Stanley Marcus Jr. He told me that he'd been through quite a few recessions. He was actually counseling me during the dot-com crash way back, in the early 2000s. And he told me, he said, Tim, when we've gone through these economic turmoils, he said, I'd always try to find a time to give the thing that was the most precious to me at the time, often my own time, to actually double down on giving during the darkest times, because he said, to quote the philosopher Gide, that which you cannot release possesses you. So as you learn to give, even when it hurts a little bit, it reconditions you to understand there really is enough to share. You get up the next day, the sun still comes up, you still make your basic obligations, he said to me, and you learn that giving is an antidote, if you will, to scarcity. So is gratitude. I get up every day and it never fails. Even today, it's an early start for me, you can imagine. I always think about two people from yesterday that helped me. And sometimes I like to reach out to them and send them a note and tell them exactly what I thought they did that made a difference. And then I like to, in the words of Dale Carnegie, give somebody credit in the coming day. Beth, that's you. I knew you'd make this journey for me today very smooth. And I think before I go into the day, that person's going to help me. They're going to be generous. They're going to be thoughtful. And as I wake my day up with gratitude, instead of checking the news or my Facebook feed, I design my mind to focus on abundance. So that's what I really wanted to identify for you, is that giving is predicated on the abundance mentality. So let's talk about these three intangibles. The first intangible is knowledge. What you know is what you can share, and what you can share is something that can make other people around you smarter. When I started this journey, though, I was working, I mentioned before, for Mark Cuban at his startup in Dallas. This is the late 90s. He ended up selling it to Yahoo. That's how I ended up at Yahoo. When I first joined the company, the thing that I thought were the most remarkable about Cuban was how much of a voracious reader he was. And he had a mantra, and I really believe this. He believed that readers are leaders, that the readers of today are the leaders of tomorrow. He'd read 75 books. It's July 1997. He'd read that many books that year. And he wasn't just curious about the internet. He talked about this idea of edge level curiosity. And he had this reading plan that I adopted, so that the idea here is that you stockpile a lot of useful knowledge so that you feel an abundance mentality about it, and you have no problem sharing it with every single person you come in contact with. So he kind of taught me a reading rotation, that there's core reading. So for you, it might be management around services. It might be customer experience. Depending on your specialty, it might be other issues like finance or technology, but there's core reading. You do it as part of how you do your job. And then there's this adjacent reading. So in Cuban's case, he didn't just read about the internet. He read about the stock market, helped him out a lot. He read about leadership, helped him out a lot. He read about brand marketing because he was building a brand at the company. So he understood that there was these adjacent topics that also helped him get even more expanded knowledge. And then he looked for things that were just interesting to him, like maybe history books or maybe biographies. He also would read things that he thought would reinforce his objectivist view, like Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged. And so by being a voracious reader and committing yourself to reading at least one book every month that gives you more knowledge that you can share, you develop this arsenal of insights that you bring to every conversation generously. And the last thing I learned, and this is actually a screenshot of how I read books, is this idea of the cliff and tag system. I learned right away that if you want to be a voracious reader and may become a better leader, you need to read with the intent of sharing and teaching other people, which means you need to take notes. So this is an example of a system I use, that when I'd read something compelling, I'd stop, I'd go back, I'd write the page number down and a quick summary of what that individual statement was, and I organized it between projects that I was working on, or maybe just the insights of the book. And it gave me a way later to go back to a book, open it up, read the cliff notes, and reinforce what I had learned from the book, say, before I started a mentorship conversation. So here's the point of it all. If you commit yourself to stockpiling useful knowledge, and I love books because they give you deep insights into a kernel of knowledge. Now, in conversation, you always have teachable opportunities. So now you can give the knowledge and grow the capacity of those that you are working with. And they, in turn, will teach you. Which leads me to the last point I want to break about knowledge, and it's the concept of mentorship. Mr. Marcus Jr. had this really interesting view of being a mentor. He stepped forward in the Dallas community when broadcast.com, that's Cuban's company, began to make headlines. We were going to be the next IPO. We were going to be the next big thing out of Dallas after probably Nortel, if you will, or EDS. And so I was doing a lot of web broadcasting. I was working with the Neiman's team on a variety of events around the holidays, and Mr. Marcus had already been retired. He offered to mentor me on what he knew a lot about, and that was customer relationship management. He's thought of as one of the pioneers in CRM. So he engaged with me in a mentorship program, not a formal program. He literally said, let's go do some lunches. I'd love to talk to you about CRM. And as he entered into that relationship, he started to perform this process, and I want to show this to you, the mentorship cycle. So this is really important. I learned from him first to identify the hero who's going somewhere, but he or she needs knowledge for the next stage of the journey. That's how mentorship works. If you go back to the beginning of mentorship, as it's written about in books like Homer's Odyssey, it really is about that mentor persona that finds the hero. If that doesn't work for you, think about Karate Kid 1, or think about Star Wars with Yoda. You find the hero. That's somebody that exhibits ambition, and they have a good heart. They have good intentions, and you see them in life. Sometimes their good intentions is just to take care of their family, make a difference in the lives of the members, but you identify the hero. You identify that giving opportunity where you can give them that gift of knowledge as the helpful guide for the next stage of their journey. And then the last thing you do is you treat the process as empowering. It's not about being smarter than the person you are teaching. It's about giving them a sense of confidence and empowerment that they can move forward, because through feedback, they will give you knowledge. Sometimes if you're mentoring them and telling them how things work, they are more contemporary than you, and they can give you feedback about, yeah, but in the real world today with the next generation, here's how that actually works. And it can refine your knowledge. Or as Mr. Marcus told me, you will never get dumber in an effort to make other people, especially younger people, smarter. So I want you to think of mentorship as a journey you take people on, and you should always have a mentee. I always do. I have 2 right now, and both of them are absolute heroes in my mind. They're on a journey. I have a curriculum for them. As a matter of fact, before my call today, I'm having this afternoon, I actually already have an outline of what he and I are going to do over an hour. So I can work through the process with him of his next career. I'm going to give him a homework assignment. I'm going to hold him accountable in the meeting we have next to demonstrate learning. Because as a mentor, you're not trying to be smarter than another person. You're not trying to make them indebted to you. You're not trying to add them to your legacy. The mentor is enthused when the student learns. So that's all you care about. The second intangible you share is your network. Your network is your net worth. It is the greatest possession you have. It is the number one asset that you build in the course of your life, and only you can take your network away. Sometimes through a mistake you might make that tarnishes your reputation, or an abuse of how you use that network, becoming too ASCII and not making ongoing contributions. Our network can solve any problem that is in front of us or anyone we ever encounter, because people in your network might not have everything you need, but their friends and contacts do. So I've learned that if you intelligently share your network with other people, it will grow exponentially. So briefly, I want to explain how I think that's done the best. And over the last 20-something years, I've really been practicing this. The idea here is that there are people in your life in conversation that will reveal to you a problem that can only be solved with an introduction to what I call a benefactor. So one of the keys in being a great super connector, not a networker, not a person that's out trying to help people so you can get something, a super connector. One of the keys is how you start conversations with people that you meet, or people that you're checking in on, or people that you're doing a one-on-one with. I never ask them, what do you do if they're new, or what are you up to if we're renewing? I ask them, what are you working on these days that you're excited about? And they will reveal to you a passion and usually a problem. They'll say, I'm working on trying to get this problem solved, but here's my challenge. And as they reveal the challenge to you, and I want you to be a listener, not someone that's just waiting for them to stop talking. I want you to listen. You may find either in the moment or after that moment, someone in your network that might be a benefactor to help them solve that problem. So then you say, I'd like to introduce you to Tommy. I believe that Tommy might be helpful to you in this situation. I might do an elevator pitch of who Tommy is and why I think he can help. But intelligent sharing means I've already thought in my mind, is this beneficiary who has a problem? Is she a good personality match for Tommy? Is she going to give him a hard time? Is she going to text him 5,000 times later? I have to really vet that a little bit because I want to intelligently make that connection, because Tommy is a person of value in my network. Then I might go to Tommy and say, hey, I'd like to introduce you to Beth. And then I do an elevator pitch about why I think Beth's a hero and worth helping. And then Tommy says, sure. Then I make what I call a power introduction. Maybe it's over a Zoom if I have time. Maybe it's over a conference call, but oftentimes it's over email these days because that's what scales. I've learned you've got to be very careful about this, right? So I've already gone to Tommy and he says, yes, I want to meet Beth. I've already sold Beth on Tommy. She says, yes, I want to see that introduction happen. So when I send that email, oftentimes I write the email, I call it my lovecat introduction. I say to the benefactor, Tommy, I want you to meet Beth. And then I provide her LinkedIn profile so he can click on that and see more about her. And then I reaffirm in a few sentences why Beth's a hero that's worth meeting and helping. Then I say, Beth, I want you to meet Tommy. Same LinkedIn link to Tommy now, so she can also look him up. Same 2-sentence summary of the elevator pitch about why, Tommy's really going to be a benefactor to her. And then I suggest the two of them meet without me, and they do it quickly. Okay. So right before I send that email, I'm going to text Tommy and say, are you still good for that introduction? I tell him I'm getting ready to send the email. Right before I send that email, I get in contact with Beth. Tommy's ready to meet you. Are you going to follow up on the email? Because I want to make sure they both execute on the opportunity. And the only follow-up I do is if I hear they haven't connected yet. But once they connect, what do? I get out of the way because I want to eliminate the friction in that introduction, okay? I don't need Beth to report to me on what happened. I don't need her to give credit to me. If they go start the next Google, I don't need friends and family or shares. I'm out because I'm on to the next introduction. I believe that we all should make 3 introductions by 3 p.m. every Friday. So write that down, 3 by 3. That's a system I've lived under for over 20 years. I will do it this week. I will do it next week. I'll do it every week I can. That means my radar is always up. My conversations are always tilting towards passion and the problem behind, achieving the passion. I am looking for opportunities to connect people that should meet every week and get out of the way. And by using this system, it's entirely possible. Now, for you, at the club, for example, it may be even more granular, right? It may be internal networking, say, between members. It may be internal networking, if you will, between other team members, contributors, if you will, and it may even be between suppliers. So some of it may not be over email, may be in the moment. You may be entirely using your phone and text to make that happen or sending people contact information. But what I want to reinforce here, though, is you have to sell the connection and you have to learn to get out of the way so the whole thing scales. All right. I want to talk to you about the last idea here before we go to Q&A, and that's the concept of the third intangible. And the third intangible is compassion. When you think about building relationships in your business life, I want you to consider compassion as the pinnacle of any great relationship. So here's what I mean by that. I believe that building relationships at work follow a sequential path. The first thing we do is, as we meet people, we share knowledge. I don't have to love you to share knowledge. I don't have to hardly know you to share knowledge. Sharing knowledge always works. It has almost zero costs and nothing but upside because of feedback. I often share with strangers I'm flying with on a plane insights from the latest book I've read, the latest case study I've read. If it's relevant to them, you could share with anybody. And by sharing knowledge, you start to develop respect on the other side, right? They start to understand that you are a generous person. They also start to understand you are a person of value, a person that adds value. So it builds kind of a foundation that moves you from transaction to relationship. And then as you develop that relationship, you can now share the second intangible, which is kind of precious. It's your network. Your network is your net worth. But now, because you've established that rapport by sharing knowledge, you can take that little risk and share your network if it's appropriate. I come from the South, so here's an analogy. If you're vegan, please forgive me. But I look at the difference between knowledge sharing and networking like the difference between ham and eggs. The chicken is involved. The pig is committed. Sharing your network of relationships is a more committed form of relationship building. It comes from that first foundation of sharing knowledge and seeing that the other is truly a hero and accepting your teaching and actually attempting to learn and put it into use. Really good candidate. For networking, compassion is the pinnacle now. Compassion is about a vulnerability that you share with other people, that vulnerability that you really have a deep set desire that they do not suffer. You have a hope and a dream that they find the success and the mental well-being that they need to become a complete person. That's a putting yourself out there vulnerability. But compassion is the heart of being a great leader. As a matter of fact, I'll tell you this. You think about customer experience or member experience. Do you know what the center of experience design is? Compassion, putting yourself in their shoes, having empathy for their feelings, desiring that they don't have unnecessary suffering in whatever process or through whatever expectation management that you embark on. So to care about people enough so that you use design thinking so they do not suffer unnecessarily is sharing compassion. Research, like Dr. Seligman at University of Northwestern, he studied positive psychology, suggests that when you show compassion for others, guess what? Through modeling and through connecting synaptic connections in their brain, the receiver becomes a more compassionate person too. I learned that growing up. All through grammar school, I was in special education. My nickname as a kid was Short Bus at church. I got picked on. My grandmother who raised me, we literally had to move to town so we could change junior highs because I was getting beat up all the time at school because people who are kids, they're hardened criminals, right? If you're weird or you're different, they pick on you. And I'll never forget, it was 7th grade before we changed schools and got me a fresh start. It was a picture day and I had a clean white shirt on for a school picture. And some bully had punched me in the nose in the bathroom because I wouldn't give him my milk money. And I had blood all over my shirt. And that's how the picture was taken that day, by the way. And when my grandmother came to pick me up in the office that day, we were sitting there and I said, it's those bullies. They're just terrible people. And she says, the problem, Tim, is you don't love them enough. And I looked at her like she was crazy. But she explained to me, bullies are bullies oftentimes. And you'll know this because you're going to start going home and having after church dinner with them and lunch with them. She says they're bullies because they're usually mistreated at home and they're just repeating what happens to them. And sure as shooting, she was right. I went home with one of these bullies. I won't say his name, but I went home with one of these bullies for lunch. By the way, he'd never had anybody come over to his house after church. His dad, who didn't go to church, who was an alcoholic, smacked him, knocked him right up against a wall. I saw it. I started to become this guy's confidant. I stood up for him when teachers said he was stupid. I gave him advice years later on how to think about getting into vocational school. He became my campaign manager when I ran for student class president my junior year. I won, surprisingly. I ended up being the king of the nerds at my high school. And I learned something. And this is the point I want to make to you. You show love to someone, they become a more loving person because you unlock something deeply inside them through your example. But one of the things I really want to share with you here is that the most loving thing you can do starting today with others is to follow the following mantra, and that is to assume best intentions. This concept philosophically has been around for a long time. To assume best intentions. Let me tell you what that means. So to assume best intentions means that you recognize that all of us are operating in our life under the best assumptions and through the best intentions, and that sometimes our agenda and objectives that we live by conflict with yours. And sometimes we are clumsy. And so guess what happens? We do things to other people that they think are rude, are selfish, hateful, and we get mad at them. But really, that's not how it works. Someone may be struggling. Someone may be simply trying to do their job, and we perceive it as a slight, and it makes us angry. And again, I want you to get back to this mental challenge of how do you overcome that programming? The answer is I always assume best intentions. So when someone comes off as being rude or selfish, I always ask myself, do you think that person might be clumsy? Do you think that their objectives conflict with my objectives? This will release you from the negative energy that will cause you to do what? Show hate instead of love. So as you assume best intentions, it becomes so much easier to approach every encounter with a sense of compassion. I'm going to stop here in just a few minutes and take some of your questions, but I want to finish with an idea here that I mentioned before. When it comes to designing a great member experience, a great customer experience, You have to put love at the center. And what we're really talking about here is the idea of design thinking. And if I could share this idea with you from David Kelly, the co-founder of IDEO, you can thank David Kelly for things like inventing pump soap or the Palm Pilot or the Apple mouse. He said design thinking is a human-centered approach to innovation that draws from the designer's toolkit to integrate the needs of the people, the possibilities of technology, and the requirements of business success. In other words, start everything you do with the needs of the people front and center, because if you do that, you are truly leading others with a heart of compassion. Here's what I want to leave with you here. This is another image I wanted to show you. Final story. This actually comes from Love is the Killer app. When I wrote the book, Tom Ward reached out to me. He was the CEO at Barton Protective Services, a frontline security company. They deployed security guards in all kinds of places, like retail stores, events, et cetera. And when he joined the company, he had to turn around that company. They had 120% turnover. You think you have staff problems? Run a security guard company. And what Tom Ward realized right away was the problem at the company is the culture of the company. They hated each other. A lot of times people settled for being a security guard. It wasn't something that they thought was a great vocation, and they didn't respect each other. And certainly the managers and the staff didn't respect them as security guards. They would even refer sometimes internally to security guards as rent-a-cops, right? You've heard that phrase. So Tom embarked on a turnaround. This is a badge they would wear around their neck called, and it was part of the Vision Quest program about creating a better Barton. And on the back of that badge was the mission and the values. Look at these values. Value number 3, love. Do you care about me as a person? That became a core part of how people were analyzed at the end of the year as managers and leaders. Do you care about the people that work for you? When something bad happens in the family life of one of those employees, Barton leadership and managers would spring to action to provide them compassion and support. And this became part of that conversation that built a new culture based on love and mutual respect. Guess what he did? He took that turnover and reduced it by 80% because people now felt like they belonged to a family. They become one of the best places to work. They went from being in the red to not only in the black, but eventually Barton was sold to a conglomerate for $1 billion. And Tom Ward realized that leading with love works if you make it a vital part of your culture. And with that, I'm going to stop. We're going to take some questions.
Oh, Tim, leading with love, would love it. And I got a whole pages of notes right here for you. And
awesome.
First I wanted to have, by the way, I loved your presentation. I've heard it before and I just
thank you
every time. Readers are leaders. I love it. And you want to become a voracious leader and read 1 book a month. If you had to recommend 3 books in the bookshelf behind you, or in your life, besides your own books, what would be the 3 books that you recommend all these club leaders read?
I'm gonna get my orientation. You see this book right here, and I know you've had her on one of your programs, Liz Wiseman, her most recent book,
That's
Impact
right.
Players. What a great book. It's really about how to cultivate high impact of your contributors. So I'm loving that book. I think that's a really important book to read. Next book. And again, it's hard for me because I read so many books, so it's hard for me to always have go-tos here. Next book, I like this book called Upstream. I can't reach back and grab it for you. It's called Upstream by Dan Heath, Heath. This book basically says that too oftentimes we live our life as leaders downstream. We wait till someone's drowning and we rescue them. As a matter of fact, we create a hero culture where all we do is put out fires and we praise people who found the fire so we can put it out. And it's an activity, but that's a problem. A problem is you can't sustain that over the course of time. So upstream thinking is the art of preventing problems from happening before they happen. And we don't do a good job, Tommy, of rewarding that in culture. So the idea here is prevention is better than cure. It's a fantastic book about the difference between strategic thinking and tactical thinking. For the club leaders watching this, upstream thinking will help you prevent member level problems before they happen. It gives you a different way to anticipate problems in advance, create scenarios months or years from now so that you stay ahead of them. It's almost like the idea of preventative healthcare, vaccines, versus reactive healthcare, treatment. Okay. You can't look at leadership as a big undo button. Leadership is something that is designed to prevent problems from happening before they happen. And then I guess the last book that I'd recommend would be the Mayo Clinic's Guide to Stress-Free Living by Dr. Amit Sood. Just Google Mayo Clinic Stress-Free Living, and you'll find a fantastic book based on a course that Dr. Sood has taught for decades to doctors of all people, Tommy, on how to live a stress-free life. The secret to the book is two things: training your attention, not to wander around mindlessly, because if it does, it's going to encounter negative things and assess it as a threat. That's the first thing, attention training. And then the second thing you're going to learn is assessment. And that is how to look at every incoming stimuli as an opportunity and not a threat. And that's going to activate the growth mindset. And he's learned that 90% of stress is cognitive, meaning 90% of stress in our life is what we pay attention to and how we assess it. That book has released me in terms of how I think about day-to-day stress.
Got it. So the three books from Tim Sanders are Liz Wiseman's Impact Players, Upstream by Dan Heath, and the Mayo Clinic's Stress-Free Living. Got it. Next question, Tim. I love your definition of love, intellectually promoting the growth of others. What are some like real tactical things, like when they hang up on this webinar in 3 minutes, besides making 3 introductions by 3 p.m., which I love, network versus net worth? What are 3 things they can do to promote the growth of others? Like they can actually just do today to grow other people?
So I want you to look at every interaction with a team member today as a teaching opportunity or a learning opportunity. Doesn't matter which one, right? So when a team member shows you stress, I want you to ask them, what is it that you need to solve this problem? Many times what they will feed back to you will reveal an opportunity for you to either share knowledge or connect them with someone, or maybe provide load management for them if they're under too much stress and strain. So I want you to play learner teacher all day long. So a person has a problem. What do you need to solve that problem? A person has a misguided notion. What can you do to, if you will, solve that notion through teaching? So learner teacher, do that today. I want you to change conversations with people that you're catching up with, or people that you meet starting tomorrow at the next thing you do. Just ask them, instead of how's it going, which they're going to say whatever, or what are you doing? Ask them, what are you working on these days, or what are you doing these days that you're passionate about? And I think it's going to begin to immediately change your conversation. Here's the last tactical thing, Tommy. Go find a book you want to read over the course of the next few months. And tomorrow when you get up, instead of going online, spend the first 30 minutes of your day reading. And that's another thing, right? You can read more if you'll carve out time to do it. And there's 3 times you can read every day. I do it. An hour and a half a day I read. First 30 minutes I get up, I don't go online. By the way, Dr. John Maxwell taught me that. Take back control of your mind. Okay. I read 30 minutes after I eat lunch. Dan Pink wrote a book called Win. That's the worst productive part of your day, is getting back after lunch. What do we usually do? The email, social media rounds, skip that and read instead. And then I read before I go to sleep. It's an hour and a half every day. So go find a book, go carve out time to start reading tomorrow. That is the beginning of you as a different, I can't tell you, like, that changes everything. So whether it's Mark Cuban's story, read, 100 books a year for years, whether it's Tony Robbins, when he read those 200 books in that small San Diego apartment in less than a year, and it reinvigorated his mind, which led to him becoming who he was. Go start reading tomorrow.
Wow, you've inspired me, Tim. I have a pile of books on my bookshelf that I just have not dived into, and I'm motivated. I love this one book.
Sign up for Audible too, right, Tommy? There's certain books that you can listen to. Like I'm listening to an 11-hour book called Range by David Epstein about the idea that you got to be a generalist and kind of wander around in your career to have that range of skills to truly be a superstar. That's a huge, long book. I don't think I could get through a book like that, on my Kindle through my slices. I read it when I'm working out. I read it when I drive to town, which is 30 minutes each way. And that way I'm really moving through these books quick.
Tim, you mentioned podcasts. Are there 2 or 3 that you really like that you want to recommend to the Florida? They might.
This is my little guilty pleasure. I like The Herd by Colin Cowherd, even though he picks on the Dallas Cowboys too much for my liking. So that's a sports one I do, is a little bit of a reward that falls into the category of interesting. I like Pivot by Dr. Scott Galloway. There's also the Professor G show. Scott Galloway's a futurist. He's a professor at New York University, Stern. Anyway, I listen to those podcasts. Mostly podcasts for me, kind of a guilty pleasure.
Yeah. I
like books. Books are the way more productive use of my listening time than a podcast if I'm trying to learn.
Yeah. I introduced you as one of the smartest, people on the circuit that I know. And I think everyone on the webinar would agree. And I think a lot of it is you're so well read, Tim, which I really admire about you.
Oh, thanks, man. And I also, and here's the key. I don't just read a lot. I talk a lot about what I read and I listen to feedback, right? Sometimes people I meet in the real world are smarter than the authors of that book. No offense to anyone who's written the book. Yeah. Right. So it's like, I don't just read a lot. I share a lot of what I read and I make myself available for real world feedback because, some of the people on the street are way smarter than people behind the typing.
Sure. And I just want to mention folks at the Club Managers Association that the book is called Love is a Killer App. It was actually Tim's first of his 5 books. And I think it's the greatest book he's written. And that's the book
thank you.
I talked about today, but Love is a Killer App. I would definitely buy that online today and read that.
And what I'm going to do is in the chat, and I'm going to squint while I do this, I'm going to put a link to an excerpt from that book that appeared in Fast Company. So you can go read it. Yep, that's it. Just click that link I put in chat. You can read about a 5,000 word excerpt from the book. It'll give you the premise of the book in more detail.
Yeah. So that's Tim Sanders, SANDERS.com//fast CEO. Awesome.
Yeah, Fastco.
Yep. Tim, thank you so much for your time, and Beth Sargent, thank you for being a partner on these amazing. We've done almost 30 authors and CEOs over the last 2 years since the pandemic, and we're moving forward to do it more next year. And just love partnering with Beth and the board of the Florida Club Managers Association. Our next Heart-Led Leader webinar is actually going to be myself, which I'm honored to do. My new book comes out September 20th called The Gift of Influence. And on September 7th is our next Florida Club Managers Association webinar series, 10 o'clock in the morning, Eastern Standard Time on September 7th. And I'll actually be at Lost Tree Country Club that morning doing a session for Rick Bayless and his team. So I'll be actually doing that webinar from Lost Tree. Beth, do you have anything to wrap things up?
Just wanted to thank everybody for being here. Wanted to thank Tim for his wisdom today. There were so many good points. I couldn't write enough notes, and I'm going to put the 3 books that he suggested in the video link that'll go out.
And I just put that link to Love in the chat just now too, Beth.
Exactly. I'll put that one as well. And I wanted to remind everybody that the password today is the word love with a capital L. Wow. And we look forward to seeing you at summer conference. And look forward to seeing Tommy on September 7th. And thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks, Tim. God bless you, buddy.